We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you Monday night episode, co-host Will Miles. You can find him at a site, readingreaction.com, where he, of course, went into a deep dive of DJ Lagway's play Saturday night, fought his big win over Samford. But, Will, we got plenty to talk about. Billy Napier talking to the media as he does every Monday. And, of course, we get some quarterback talk. We will extend that to some offensive line talk. And we'll go back and take a look at Nick Saban's comments on game day about the culture at Florida. We got a loaded episode here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Some good, some bad. And, I'm sure everybody will know right where I stand by the time we get to the end of this one. That's for sure.
I think most people already know where you stand, Will, but yeah.
It will be abundantly clear.
Guys, Will and I were having some fun before the episode out, so you're right. It kind of did feel like we were like drinking a little bit, like, conversation, but no, not a lick of alcohol in my system right now.
Yeah, turns out that, well, we'll get to it. There's plenty to get to, and you don't rile me up just yet. Go ahead and play Billy's quotes, and then I'll be pretty riled up to go.
All right, there we go. As Will just said, we will hear from Billy Napier. A few little comments there from him. I follow the rules from Florida. I only get to share about 3 minutes worth of there. So we'll get to hear about 3 minutes worth of Billy Napier, as I said, on the quarterback stuff, the offensive line, and the rotation there. Of course, that's gotten a lot of people asking some questions about what's going on up front for the Gators. More than usual of what's going on up front for the Gators. So lots to get into. So everybody hit that like button, subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. But either way, like, subscribe, leave some comments right there. I know some comments in the chat. I'll try to come back around to those. I'll share them throughout the episode as well. But plenty to get into. Gators Breakdown Plus as well. Keep that conversation going. Access to the Discord. Get those newsletters as well. And, of course, the busy football season, you get the ad-free episodes. So I know heavy ads this time of year, taking advantage of football season, but you get your ad-free episodes there. Link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. Well, of course, after DJ Lagway's performance on Saturday, a lot of questions toward Billy. I think half the press conference was about DJ Lagway Saturday night and today on Monday. And, of course, the status of Graham Mertz. Still hasn't officially clear concussion protocol yet. One more step there that is expected to be happening early in the week here. So whatever you want to call it, quarterback controversy, we'll see. Whatever you want to call it out there. I know in the fan base it is certainly a controversy. I think I see more leaning towards Lagway than I do Mertz. Of course, a lot of excitement there based off of Saturday night. But let's hear from Billy Napier on what he liked about DJ Lagway's performance on Saturday and the quarterback situation moving forward.
I was impressed with the vertical passing game. I thought he was very accurate down the field. I think ultimately that's probably the poise on Friday and then just the composure throughout the game. His ability to throw completions, to do what he's been coached to do, take what the defense gave him. And then when given an opportunity to make an explosive, he was able to do that. And look, credit the protection, credit the skill players for running good routes and getting open. I think we did it all well. And kind of the point of emphasis worked. Hey, look, rookie quarterback, first start, everybody's got to raise their level of play around them. And I think we did that for the most part.
Billy, the casual fan looks at how DJ played the other night in the five-star recruiting and stuff and all that. It says, why is Graham still going to be the starter? Help us understand. What's the thought process there?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of these dynamics, I think, over the years in terms of having a veteran player who's accomplished, who's had a good career, and that's coming back, who's in a leadership role. And then you've got this young talent. We all knew he was very talented from the beginning of his recruitment. So, look, we're going to do what's in the best interest of the team, and I think both these players can make our team better, and I think that's what we intend to do. So And the great thing about it is there's a great relationship there. There's confidence, there's humility from both guys, and I think there's a healthy respect from the team and the staff for both players.
Well, so nothing official there from Billy Napier about naming a starter for Saturday. As I said, Graham Mertz still in concussion protocol right now, but never really came out and said one guy was starting Saturday versus Texas A&M. So did go back and he talks about DJ Lagway's performance. We'll start there, then we'll get into the controversy talk, I guess. But both are going to play. That was pretty apparent by what Billy Napier was saying right now. Both. So whether DJ Lagway starts or not, if Lagway starts, it still sounds like Mertz will play. So it does sound like you're going to get two quarterbacks moving forward. But Will, great article right up there at Reading Reaction that you put out on Sunday looking at DJ Lagway's performance. And, of course, mentioning the vertical passing game. And I shared the stat yesterday on Twitter, so if you guys don't follow me there, Will, this one caught a lot of attention as we knew it would. Graham Mertz completed 5 passes of 40-plus yards all of last year. DJ Lagway completed 5 passes of 40-plus yards in his first career start versus Samford. It jumps off the page at just how much the offense opens up, no matter the competition, with DJ Lagway behind center.
Yeah, I mean, so look, Lagway didn't take what was given to him. Lagway took shots into coverages. He took shots that we might call ill-advised. In fact, Steve Adazio on one called one of them ill-advised. He anticipated guys coming open. He let the ball go before the guy got past the defender, but trusted that his wide receiver was going to do that. The throw to Badger was a great example. I diagrammed it in my post-game article where when Lagway lets the ball go, he's not behind the corner. It's one-on-one coverage, but, a couple of years ago, that ball's a little bit short. You got to high point the ball. Maybe Justin Shorter goes and gets it. Last year, nobody was really going to get that one. This year, he just put it right out there, laid it out there for Badger to catch. I'm not quite sure how Badger didn't get all the way to the end zone on that one. And then the throw to Mizell is obviously the one that everybody sort of looks at and says, wow. But, I mean, other than the last drive of the half, where he was rushing because the clock management was relatively bad, and I sort of blame that on the coach. Other than that, Lagway threw 3-4 incompletions the entire game when you factor in. So, I mean, it wasn't just he took what the defense gave him. It was he's pushing the ball down the field in a way we haven't seen at Florida in a really long time. Now, we have to caveat all this with it was just Samford, because we'll caveat all our Texas A&M talk later with it was just McNeese State. And we do need to take that into account. At the same time, we haven't seen this on a field in Gainesville in a really long time. I mean, Trask in 2020, but even he wasn't go down the field consistently. He was sort of that intermediate passing, but the feeling is the same from the standpoint of 2nd and 9 no longer feels insurmountable. 3rd and 6 is no longer guaranteed to be a little dump off where you got to have the tight end make somebody miss in order to get a first down. This was something where the defense has to respect what Lagway is going to do deep. And then what he's going to do is as he develops, he's going to start hitting those intermediate and the short routes and the dump offs and all those sorts of things when it's given to him. But I disagree with Napier from the standpoint of he took what was given to him. I don't think he did. I think he was aggressive. I think it was a lot of first read. We're going in that direction, but I think he's got the arm talent. And a lot of times those deep throws, even at, your guy, if he's running full tilt, can get past a safety as long as the ball is thrown far enough and as long as the ball is thrown on time. The play to Tank Hawkins is a great example. He actually threw it to the wrong guy. Hawkins is double covered on that play. It just so happens that Hawkins is faster than anybody else on the field, ran right by him. He trusted it, and he put it in the right place. If he'd have left that up a little bit short, a little bit too much air, if it had been a little bit short, now we're talking about what a terrible throw. He threw into double coverage. There were 2 guys back there. Lagway has an ability to throw into those spaces in a way Graham Mertz just doesn't. Now, again, I think a lot of those were first reads. I do agree that Lagway is raw. I think when you look at the film, you can see that he's raw. But there's also it's different when DJ's out on the field. And you even felt that against Miami. If it was just this game, I'd go, okay, I get it. It's Samford, stuff like that. But and you sort of said, well, is it the same given, was Miami playing with the same intensity by the time Lagway came in? But it's easy to forget that the only touchdown drive where a quarterback threw the ball in that game against Miami was led by Lagway, right? And Mertz wasn't very effective in that game against Miami when he tried to go downfield. And so there's just a night and day difference between the two of them. And And, I'm interested to see how they use them, because the thing that I think we really learned in the Sanford game is that Lagway is not Tim Tebow. Like, Tim Tebow had a very specific skill set that Chris Leak did not. Like, if you look at the Venn diagram of the skills of Tim Tebow in 2006 and the skills of Chris Leak in 2006, like, there's very little overlap at all with that Venn diagram. And if you look at the Venn diagram of the skills of DJ Lagway and the skills of Graham Mertz, there's a lot of overlap there. Like, having a package with Lagway, if you're not going to throw the ball with him, is kind of a waste of the
Yeah.
And having a package with Mertz where he's going to run the ball, also a complete waste. Like, I just look at it and I go, the dynamic that Lagway brings to the game is one that opens some things up. And to only do that for 2 or 3 drives a game doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But again, I'm not the one seeing him in practice. I would say that looking at the Sanford game,
Hey, I'm glad you brought that up.
like that last year against McNeese State or Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, and I know Shane Matthews talked about it too, but it was something I started hearing about yesterday at the same time. It's like, maybe Lagway's a gamer. Like, in practice, he doesn't look that great. Like, he will throw a string of 6, 7 bad passes. He'll show that one highlight. But when the game comes on, so far, caveat, it is Sanford. But it's the things that they were seeing against Sanford was not what he showed consistently in practice. And maybe, of course, competition probably comes into play. But at the same time, just pure accuracy. And knowing where to go with the ball, kind of like you said, okay, it can be questionable, but he's going to take his chances because I think there's some belief in his arm and he's got belief in the weapons around him at the same time. But maybe practice isn't so pretty, but when the lights come on, he's a gamer. He's going to make some plays. Well, something I want to keep track of and something I noticed there, I went back and watched the game a bit too. And one aspect, and I want to see if this is something that continues no matter who the quarterback is, competition ramping up in SEC play. And I tweeted this out too earlier today was we didn't get the predictable automatic run on 2nd and long. Like, it's just been a staple of this offense under Billy Napier. When first down's not successful and it's 2nd long, try run play and try to make it 3rd manageable. Well, I mean, for Lagway, 2nd and 13, he gained 4 yards. 2nd and 10, he gained 7. 2nd and 7, he gained 8 yards, so a first down. 2nd and 13, a 24-yard completion. 2nd and 10, a 5-yard completion. And then the other last one was 2nd and 15. That was his only incompletion on these 2nd and long situations. That was a foregone conclusion in this offense. Well, if first down's not successful, we're sure as heck going to run it on 2nd down. Wasn't the case versus Sanford for Lagway. So that's something I want to keep an eye on, whether just overall in the offense or if it's going to be as predictable or I guess unpredictable in some ways of what Florida's going to do on 2nd down. Is it going to be different from when Graham Mertz is on the field, if he's on the field, and when DJ Lagway's on the field?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. I'll be really interested to see Bud Davis every week pulls the numbers for Florida and what they do out of the pistol versus what they do when they have a back who's offset. And for the last 2 years, it's been run heavy out of the pistol. And I'll have to go back and look at the film to see, but did those play actions where they were running the floods and where they were taking the deep shots, did those come out of the pistol? I think they did. Like, I don't think that I think so. I think in some ways
the play to Badger, I'm trying to think was
something to look for, and certainly something that we'll look at afterwards, but that's something to think about in terms of breaking tendency. The other thing that I'll go back to that I disagree with you a little bit on is, or maybe here's what I'll say. Is we were told last year coming out of fall camp, this team was ready for Utah. Yeah. We were told coming out of fall camp, this team was ready for Miami. The fact that Lagway is not doing in practice what he did against Sanford, I don't believe it for a second. I watched that guy just chuck the ball all over the field. I don't believe it for a second. And to be honest, the last time I heard that statement, there were people sitting there going, well, AR is not showing this stuff in practice. I'm like, but every time he touches the ball in the game, it's an 85-yard touchdown. Like, I don't believe it. And now look, I think we saw that Anthony Richardson had some inconsistencies, but we also saw a guy who went 4th in the NFL draft. And that's what we were looking at on Saturday, is a guy who, if we get 3 years out of him, we will be lucky.
Yeah.
And we will be fortunate. And we will be watching him get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Why do you want to delay that? Like, what?
If you talk to a lot of people, we might be lucky to get. If you talk to a lot of people, we might be lucky to get 1 year out of him.
Well, I mean, but again, that's sort of the point, right? Is
Yeah.
by regardless of what happens with the coaching situation with the program, if things fall apart and Napier's gone, or if Napier's back because things all of a sudden turn rosy and that Miami game was just an aberration, regardless of what happens, you're not winning anything without Lagway at quarterback in 2025, so this year has to be about getting ready for that. Now, you do have a little bit of you've got a mismatch of incentives, right? From the standpoint of Billy Napier doesn't have time for DJ Lagway to learn
Right.
on the run if he's not able to win him some games. And, in some ways that's because of the heat that people like us put on him. But in some ways it's because we can't get the field goal unit on against Arkansas and all those other things. So, he sort of set himself up to have to win now.
Right.
And if he's going to Mertz, he thinks Mertz gives him the best shot to win. But look, the scared money don't make money move is not Graham Mertz. I think Mertz, Nick Knudsen, my partner over there at Read and Reaction, made a really good point, is that one of the things he said is that he likes Mertz. Mertz is a really good guy. Seems like a good guy to root for. Great locker room presence. He's 5-7. Like, even Felipe Franks, when we were talking about this, he deserved to have the starting job. You're sitting there looking at it, he won a few games. Like it wasn't 5-7, at least not after that 2018 season. And we were sort of talking about Trask versus Franks coming into that 2019 season before Franks got hurt. And, even then it was, well, are they going to give Franks a shot? And then turns out Franks transfers to Arkansas. But, we've seen this movie before where you see a guy with a whole bunch of tools and you see a guy who's sort of steady Eddie. And steady Eddie might be a great guy, but you need the guy with the tools to win. And that's just sort of the way it is. And given we're going to talk about offensive line, we're going to talk about defense, given the shortcomings there, you're not going to get away with 28 points or 25 points and winning a bunch of games this year. You're going to need 40. And I'm sorry, that's the situation you've put yourself in as the head coach, is against good teams and good offenses. You're going to need 40 points to win. And if you ask me right now, like, I think there's a high variance if you play Lagway. It's entirely possible that he could completely crash and burn. But it's also entirely possible that you average 45 points the rest of the season, and all of a sudden you go 9-3, and we're sitting there going, Miami's a really good team. Does Florida deserve to be in the playoff? Now, again, Samford, I don't want to get all that excited about that particular performance, but is there any shot with Graham Mertz at quarterback that we have that ceiling? Right. There is a shot that you have that ceiling with Lagway, which is the first reason to go with him. The second reason to go with him is that we actually saw passes more than 18 yards past the line of scrimmage that were completed.
Not only that, you and I will, and I'll credit a lot of other people out there too, but you and I were texting during the game on Saturday, and something you and I noticed on these big plays, multiple wide receivers open. So it's amazing how much better the offense looks because of
when you throw it to the open guy. Yeah.
I mean, even when he's not throwing to the quote unquote open guy, there's a guy, lack of better explanation, mid-level of the play, a guy streaking across the middle of the play, 20, 30 yards down the field, who's also either wide open or more open than the guy he actually throws it to. So there's even multiple options when DJ Lagway is back at quarterback, and he can throw it deep, but there's another underneath guy too that you can probably get 20, 30, 40 yards with. And my favorite play, I think that came with it, of course, I love the Mizell throw, but I think just from a play design aspect of this was the Tank Hawkins touchdown. As you said, he trusts Tank Hawkins to outrun defenders there, anticipation, throws him open. Well, it was underthrown a little bit, but still, you knew what he was trying to do with that pass. But that was all set up by Damian George coming across the line of scrimmage, a play action behind that, and everybody's drawn up. So right behind those guys that are drawn up trying to play the run is a wide open, is it DK, I think?
Yep.
And then, but he throws it to Tank Hawkins, and it's a touchdown anyway. So, yes, one more time, and I won't say it again, it is Samford. There's a caveat there. These windows are going to get a whole lot smaller. But still, I mean, you saw what you wanted to see from a play design perspective, a play call perspective, that there's many options for the quarterback to go with the ball.
Yeah. So my favorite play was actually the one I think right before the throw to Hawkins, which was he had zeroed in on Trey Wilson. That was the
Yeah.
only guy he was going to throw to, but he released the ball so soon that it allowed the safety to drop. And so it looked like he threw into double coverage, but it really wasn't. It was that he anticipated the throw so much that it allowed the defender to sort of get to it. He's going to learn. Like, he will learn that you can't telegraph it quite that much. But I looked at that and I went, that's anticipation. And anybody goes, yeah, there's a JT O'Sullivan has something called the QB School. If people want to check that out, it's really cool. Bunch of free stuff on YouTube, but then he's also got a Patreon channel. And if you look at him break down any sort of offense, any sort of quarterback, the thing he really points to with just about everybody is anticipation. Does he get the ball out before the guy breaks? Does he get the ball out before the guy's open? Does he get the ball out before the window closes? And that's what I saw against Samford. Samford's slower than the opponents they're going to play, no doubt. There will be times where he makes a throw where he sees something and it's not the right thing. And I think one of the things A&M would do if Lagway was in there is they do a bunch of post snap type of, they line up as a middle of the field open and then they switch or rotate into a middle of the field closed situation. And what he saw at pre-snap isn't what he's seeing post snap, and he has to go to another read. Like, I think that's a place where he probably will struggle. He will probably throw some interceptions, but the anticipation is there. And that's the thing that gets me excited, is that anticipation has nothing to do with with who's on defense. Anticipation has to do with just sort of that innate characteristic as a quarterback where you see the guy coming open, whereas the other guy double clutches. And one of the things that I showed in the Miami game for Mertz is there was an opportunity to hit Boardingham in the red zone when they took that field goal early on. And he delayed. He was looking at the outlet, and then the outlet was taken away. And so then he basically went short to intermediate to long. Like, that was the route tree. And that's not how that's taught. Like, because I know it's not, because essentially on the play, it was a high-low where if the safety comes down, you go deep to Boardingham. If the safety goes deep, you go intermediate to, I think it was Hansen. And then if nobody's open, you dump it off to Webb, who was the outlet. He was looking at Webb first. And so he was late getting the ball out to Boardingham, and Boardingham's on the sideline, and it gave the safety time to catch up and knock the ball down. I didn't see any of that against Samford. Now, look, completely different pass rush, completely different defenders, all that sort of stuff. But it still sort of goes back to, what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to stay in a bunch of games, or are we trying to actually win? And if you look at Mertz's splits, the last 5 games, the first game this year and his last 4 last year, his QB rating is 139.5, 139.7. If you look at his record against ranked opponents, his QB rating is 140. If you take out the cupcakes last year, his rating was 148, and then his rating overall 153. So he wasn't the guy who lit up the cupcakes, but also when you start controlling for quality of opponent, that QB rating starts to creep down into the average range as opposed to the above average. And certainly against Miami, he just really wasn't very good. And I think that sort of colors most people's opinion on this one. Yeah. I think if we'd have gotten a normal Graham Mertz performance from last year in that first game against Miami, it'd be a different discussion. I have been somebody who has been critical of Mertz even last year, and so I'm quick on the trigger to say we should make a change. I get that. But there's a difference between the two of them. It's pretty much night and day. And like I said, I don't believe anything that comes out of practice because, special teams has looked great in practice for the last 2 years. The defenses look fantastic in practice for the last 2 years. And, they were ready for Miami and ready for Utah the last 2 years. And none of that has been true. So I'm not willing to take somebody's word for it that Lagway, for some reason, magically can throw completions deep on Saturdays, but can't do it on Thursdays during the week.
Man, where was I going with that? Your Mertz comment. I mean, yeah, and this is coming from somebody who I expected a second year in the system jump for Graham Mertz, and I'm ready to turn the page to DJ Lagway. And maybe we go back to week 1, and maybe that is an overreaction from game 1. That is one of the worst, if not the worst game Graham Mertz has played in a Florida Gator uniform. Would I expect him to play that bad again? Probably not. But going to the point of, especially if you're on this coaching staff, if you're Billy Napier, are you viewing this from a pressure-packed, trying to save my job lens, or are you just thinking about it the way you were 2 weeks ago coming into the season? Graham Mertz is my guy. Graham Mertz gives us the best chance to win. I don't want to throw DJ Lagway out there. Either way, it does sound like, given Napier's comments, both will play. No, we didn't see it, and he goes back and he talks about the Miami game, Will, saying with the game, we didn't have a lot of plays in the first half, and that's why you didn't necessarily see DJ Lagway before he actually had to come in before Graham Mertz was hurt. Now, there was a plan to put Lagway in that game, too. I'm like, I don't really ever see where you were going to put I mean, that was what, midway through the third quarter?
Well, there weren't any plays because Mertz was terrible.
Well, that's part of it, too.
Just awful.
And that's a good point, too. You could have forced it because Mertz wasn't playing well. Whether I don't know what was designed, because listen, this was midway through the third quarter, I think, when he gets hurt. I mean, just because of him struggling, you thought you would have maybe seen a change if Lagway was in the plan to play that game. But he says they'll have a plan for those guys to play in every game moving forward. So we'll see. We'll see what that means. But I don't know. I'm big Mertz fan here is ready to turn the page as well.
I am fully convinced that Graham Mertz is going to play the first 3 quarters against A&M.
Ooh.
and we won't see DJ. I just don't understand. If you think that Mertz is a better quarterback throwing the ball, I see the comment. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Bill Sykes is down there calling me too negative. If you think that Mertz is the better quarterback throwing the ball, if Billy Napier really thinks that, then DJ Lagway shouldn't see the field.
Yeah.
Like, if you really think he's better, there's too much overlap in their skill sets. Lagway shouldn't see the field. Like, you really trying to get him, like, you're going to put him out there for read options? Like a 4th and 1 when you need a yard? Is that what you're going to do? And you're going to put a true freshman out there in a big time situation?
No, we're going to see more wildcat.
Well, I mean, we could do that too. That'd be great. I mean, so I just look at it and I go, if you really believe that Mertz is the best guy chucking the ball, Lagway shouldn't play. And so I don't know how you have a package for Lagway. I mean, maybe you do just to say you had it. But I mean, if you're bringing him in, like everything that you're pinning on Mertz is he's got intangibles, he's got the experience, he knows how to get us in the right protections, he's not going to turn the ball over, he's going to be reliable on like the short and intermediate, he can keep the chains moving, like all that sort of stuff. Like, those are all things that Lagway theoretically does worse. So what you're doing is saying, well, we'll bring in Lagway when we need the explosive. Like, basically, right. We're going to take the shot, bring him in off the pitch. I don't know.
Yep.
Like, he clearly does some things better than Mertz. I'm saying this obviously tongue in cheek. But if you think that Mertz is better throwing the ball through the air, then Lagway shouldn't play. I happen to think Lagway is much better at the vertical passing game, and some of the other things are going on too. And I think some of the game management stuff is overrated. I think you got to learn that. And the only way you learn that is by getting in the game. I mean, you think about Tennessee years ago with Peyton Manning came in and, obviously there were a couple of injuries there. I mean, even Todd Helton, who was the backup, got injured, then went on to be a Hall of Fame baseball player. But Peyton Manning comes in and just lights everything up. I mean, when's the last time a quarterback came in and like really, really struggled and then turned it around and became like a transcendent guy? Like, maybe you could say Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. Like, but even then, Daniels was a serviceable quarterback. Like, probably, if I looked at his numbers, probably pretty close to what Mertz did last year at Arizona State. And then he comes to LSU and makes a decent jump and then a huge jump. So I don't know. I'm just a big believer in if they've got it, you're going to see it. And yeah, there will be some mistakes, and yeah, there will be some growing pains. But man, I'll take a pick 6 if it means we score 35 points. Because I'm not sure you're getting to 35 points with dinking and dunking it down the field and missing your deep shots all the time.
I mean, probably a bad comparison because Nebraska had nobody like Graham Mertz ahead. I mean, but Nebraska, they didn't go get a transfer portal quarterback to hide Dylan Raiola. They're bringing him in. You're a true freshman. You're granted, I'm sure we know he's got a huge NIL deal to get him away from Georgia and go. But, from day one, they knew he was going to be the starting quarterback as a true freshman. And they were willing and ready, and they probably got a little bit more time as well, too. But they're excited about their true freshman quarterback. They're giving the true freshman quarterback, the highly touted true freshman quarterback, every opportunity to go win them some ball games and learn on the fly. Big win over Colorado, and Dylan Raiola plays okay in that game. Yeah, but still, same class as DJ Lagway, highly rated quarterback. Different situation because you have Graham Mertz ahead, but they felt comfortable with going ahead and turning the page to a true freshman quarterback to maybe take some lumps, maybe win some games, because as going to your original point, Will, the ceiling is just that high.
So Jaden Daniels had a QB rating of 143.4 at Arizona State. And Graham Mertz, when you look at his time at Wisconsin, was at 127.7, and he's at 153.8 at Florida. So certainly an improvement, and took that step. And I think one of the reasons why I've been sort of anti-Mertz the entire time is that you rarely see a guy take 2 leaps in a row. And if you look at Daniel's stats, it's basically his first year at LSU, he put up stats very much in line with what he did at Arizona State. He took the leap from year 1 to year 2. So at LSU. So looking for a second leap from Mertz, I think, is really wishful thinking. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at him going, okay, I can get a QB rating of 145 to 150 if he plays well. If he plays like he did against Miami, where his QB rating's 80, it's like, all right, well, that's not great. And Lagway, I just sort of look at and go, even if he's at 130, he brings something in the running game that gives you some additional oomph that you don't get with Graham Mertz. So, and considering that the offensive line has not been great either in the running game or the passing game, considering sort of where you sit, and considering that, just the reality of this guy's pedigree suggests you need him to contribute and contribute early. I think it's time to make the move. And look, maybe in Napier's defense, I said this last night at Stand Up and Holler. I was like, well, maybe Napier in his post-game press conference didn't want to essentially say, yeah, we're going to start Lagway without telling Mertz that he'd lost his job face-to-face. So I was like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So maybe I should give him the benefit of the doubt again and say he's trying to keep Texas A&M having to prepare for both of them. But I'm expecting Graham Mertz to play a ton. I'm expecting DJ Lagway to get a series or 2. And I'm expecting Florida fans to be incensed about it because I'll be leading the charge. So Lagway needs to play. It's as simple as that, man. For the health of the program, Lagway needs to play.
Couple hypotheticals for you, Will. Would you be okay with, and I don't know, this is me guessing out loud, alternating drives?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I that's even worse.
I think it is too.
So again, I go back to my main criticism of Napier after the Miami game, other than the fact that he ripped my heart out again to open the season, was that he had 2 situations that were 4th downs, and they were almost identical.
You want conviction.
I do. I want him to have some stones and actually go with it. So come out and say, Mertz is my starter. I don't care what anybody says. He's going to lead us forward. And I go, I disagree, but man, some stones. We got 2 quarterbacks, and we'll get one of them a play here, a play there, and maybe DJ will get to play as he gets a little bit older in our system. Like, come on. I mean, go out there with some conviction. Tell your team what's going on and have confidence that you don't need to play this game where, A&M doesn't know who the quarterback's going to be. We're really getting an advantage. You know what the advantage would be? Is if you went out there and actually executed offense and defense in your home field and whipped their butt. Because here's the reality. If Florida loses to Texas A&M against Power 4 opponents, Billy Napier's under 500 in the swamp if he loses that game. So, what he's been doing thus far, not that effective. The
swamp mystique has taken a huge hit.
I tell you what, I was the biggest Billy Napier fan in the world after 2022 when he went up to Wisconsin and said, all gas, no brakes. Every 4th down, we're going for it. Every 2-point conversion, we're going for it. The analytics say that this is my best shot to win. My defense is terrible, and I'm going to have to cover for him by having an offense that is aggressive. And ever since that game, he's been a turtle, just like going into his shell. And I was sitting there going, no, don't criticize him. That was the best thing he could have done. That was his best shot to win the game. I had this entire list of the win probabilities that he added to the team by making those decisions. And some of them were good decisions and some of them were bad decisions. Or some of them turned out well and some of them turned out poorly. but they were all good decisions. They all helped Florida raise their win probability overall. And if you do that over the course of an entire year, you will win more than you lose because you're maximizing the edge that you have. And Florida is not a good enough team to go out there and just beat everybody on the merits of their talent, which means you have to find every little edge that you can. And so a little edge to me is not saying, oh, well, I'll alternate these guys on drives and, oh, well, we'll see who plays better in the first half and then we'll play him in the second. Like, come on. Now, if you want to have one guy breathing over the other guy's shoulder like Spurrier used to do, I mean, that is not something like there is something to be said for those guys knowing that there might be real competition there. That's all fine. But no, alternating drives, not a chance, dude. Just if you're going to play Mertz and go down with that ship. If you're going to play Lagway and go down with that ship. Make a decision, stick with it, because otherwise you're trying to straddle a fence. And to be honest, Florida doesn't have the margin of error to straddle a fence. You got to make a decision. And if it's the wrong decision, you got to live with it. I happen to think that Lagway is the better decision, but if he went with Mertz the whole way, I'm actually better with that than if he went alternating drives, because alternating drives suggests he doesn't know what the hell to do. He's just like, I'll minimize the criticism by alternating drives. No, you'll just get criticized by everybody. And have some conviction and go with your conviction. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But again, I'll have more respect for the decision if it's Mertz and that's it, than if he alternates drives. I'll still be incensed, but I'd have more respect for the decision.
That plays into my next hypothetical because, if you alternate drives and say you lose 27-20 or something like that, you'll be like, well, if Lagway would have played more, if the game had played out that way, if Lagway had good stats and you lose by a touchdown, well, maybe you win the game if he plays more. Well, do you feel different? Hypothetical here, because you won't be on Gators Breakdown until next Monday. If Billy Napier starts Graham Mertz, I'm talking job security wise, how would you look at this? 27-20 loss to Texas A&M with Graham Mertz starting, 27-20 loss with DJ Lagway starting.
So
now, of course, a lot can come into play here.
Yeah. So I think the Lagway start gives him more leeway. Certainly. I think the Mertz start is one where you go, this is your team, your quarterback, and you just lost to a team that quite honestly probably isn't going to be the greatest team in the SEC. We always see this when there's a coaching turnover. Everybody's like, oh, it'll be an immediate turnaround. It never is. Even Saban wasn't able to turn around his program the first year. Kirby wasn't able to they both took steps back. So A&M lost to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame then loses to NIU. How good are they really? Like, there's a lot of question here about this team specifically. I mean, I guess I'd probably give more grace, but again, and this is maybe the reason why you would lean towards Mertz if you're Napier, is I'm not sure there's any withdrawals left. Right. I mean, the withdrawal against Utah last year and the withdrawal on the 5-game losing streak and the withdrawal against Miami have been so big that, the question is there any coming back from it? And the only coming back from it in my mind is that DJ Lagway all of a sudden is like playing like Heisman level quarterback. You go, whoa.
Yeah. You get Caleb Williams a few years ago.
Exactly. Right. And all of a sudden everything turns around.
Yeah.
And that's the only path. Like 20-17, they win with Mertz starting. I don't know that it changes my view of the program long term.
Right. It shouldn't. Yeah.
But that's the problem that Napier has right now, is that he can't play for 2024 because I don't care about 2024 in the big picture. I do not expect this team to compete for a playoff or an SEC championship this year. I don't. And the coach's job is to sell you on wins or sell you on hope. And I don't think you're getting enough wins to sell the program and the boosters and the fans and all those sorts of stuff with Graham Mertz as a starting quarterback. Again, just like Knudsen said, great guy, easy to root for. I'd love it if he played great. But I don't see that coming with this schedule and this team long term. And so I look at it and say, the only thing you have left to do is to sell the fan base on the hope of who's coming. And we've been waiting for 2 years now for Lagway to take over at quarterback. And Lagway comes out and just rips it up the first time he goes out there in a way that we haven't seen in a really long time. And so, good for Lagway for making it this. I mean, if he'd have come out and just sort of put up sort of an average performance. It's funny, you mentioned that the offense looked different. It didn't in the first drive. The first drive where they turned it over on downs, it was like run on first down, run on second down. Lagway throws a little 6-yard hitch, and then they go for it on fourth down out of the wildcats. Like, like DJ Lagway, welcome to the Graham Mertz experience. Yes, there would be more grace for me if Lagway loses in a 20-17 loss than if Mertz loses in a 20-17 fashion. But the problem is that I don't have a lot of patience for 20-17 losses at all at this point.
Yeah.
Third year, your guys, your program. If it turns out that Lagway, so let's say Mertz loses the game this week when you put him in, and then you put in Lagway next week and he lights it up. Well, that means you made the wrong decision this week, right? Yep. So like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you stick with Mertz, unless Mertz goes out and throws for 350 and 4 touchdowns, and then I'm coming on here next week going, apparently I don't know anything about football. So we'll see. Hopefully that happens. I will be happy to come on here on Monday and eat a bunch of crow if Graham Mertz goes out there and lights up A&M like a Christmas tree and we win the game.
All right, so a lot of quarterback talk there. This episode of Gators Breakdown, we will see what goes on Saturday in the Swamp, 3:30 kickoff between Florida, Texas A&M. Do we see one and ride, or do we see, as Napier says, both quarterbacks? He did admit today there's some gamesmanship going on. He's not going to throw everything out there, so we'll see what it means on Saturday. What we may see still on Saturday, Will, is a rotation up front on the offensive line. Probably odd, that now we are third game into the 2024 season and not really being settled there. Here's Billy Napier on that group.
Quarterback, you've mentioned before the competition along the offensive line. I think you also implied last week that guys like Austin Barber can be in for a higher amount of snaps. The rotating against Samford, was that still in a desire to assess your options around the quarterback there?
Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure out what the best lineup is there. And look, we need to get better. That group has got to play better. I think we took a step in the right direction. We practiced better. Obviously, the competition level was different, right? So this week we'll face a huge challenge, and that'll be a big part of the game is up front on offense. Can we answer the bell and show up and play a certain brand of football? And then when we have to protect, we got to do our job in that regard. So, the offensive line needs to continue to grow and develop and improve as the season goes for sure.
Still not settled, Will. They need to be better, says Billy Napier. So, darn me for showing concern in fall camp with that offensive line that still is not figured out right now going into the third game of the season against a pretty good Texas A&M front. They're not stat heavy Texas A&M front, but will offer a good bit up front on the defensive line. We'll get into later this week with previews. But of course, Will against Samford did show improvement like they should have. But still not, I don't think consistently what you want to see from this offensive line. Still not able to open up some huge holes in the run game. Austin Barber, top Pro Football Focus with his rating for the group. Jake Slaughter as well, playing pretty well. Both those guys leading the charge up there. Solid in run blocking, pass protection as well. Barber's really standing out. I think him being healthy, I think he's played a pretty good 2 games here when he's actually been on the field. It just hasn't been on the field a lot, has Austin Barber. They're trying to protect him. Of course, he's bouncing back from injury a bit. We'll see what that means. Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon he made his first start. Remember, Cam Waits made the start versus Miami. Crenshaw-Dixon got the start versus Samford. But Damian George, Cam Waits, Devin Manuel, Caden Jones, Fletcher Westfall, Bryce Lovett, Roger Kearney all got into some action as well. Better in pass protection. No sacks for the Gators, but still struggling in run blocking. 4.9 yards a carry, did Florida have versus Samford. We were all excited about what DJ Lagway was doing, but not the huge runs in the run game, of course. So Najee Harris, not a great game, there at left guard. But to make matters worse, I think when you look at it is Arlis Bordyham is through 2 games is a liability still, pass blocking and run blocking, not doing much in either phase in that regard. So an offensive line Now, might need a tight end to help him every now and then. Hayden Hanson's doing his job, but with Arnold Sportingham's out there, Will, you can certainly see another option to help that offensive line not really being able to do so.
Yeah, I mean, look, Florida's offensive line has been relatively porous the last couple of years, and this is one of the risks when you try to fill it through the transfer portal, right? Is that when you do that there's a possibility you don't hit. And they brought in 2 tackles, and the thought process was, hey, with Manuel and Crenshaw Dixon along with Barber, that you'll be able to sustain an injury there and still have guys who are, and still have guys who are capable, at least. Because last year, I think with Damian George on the outside, we would definitely say that they weren't really all that capable on the outside. And the hope was you slide George inside, and all of a sudden everything would look great. The interesting thing is that you just got done telling me that DJ Lagway is not playing because he struggles in practice, but is a gamer. And apparently we have the exact opposite with our offensive line, because we start these guys who look great in practice, and then when we look at them on the field, we go, oh, we get no push, and we can't protect our quarterback.
Hey, that actually did bleed over. I showed the concerns a few weeks ago, and I got blasted for it.
I mean, again, I look at it, and I'm like, sort of the same thing I said with Mertz and Lagway is you got to show some conviction and put the guys out there and ride with it, right? And if those guys struggle, if they do something stupid like get a personal foul penalty, all right, pull them off the field. But who are the best 5 in practice, and go with it. And if it's still porous, that's fine. But just throwing out the other guy who is porous in practice isn't going to make it any better in a game.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we have this flower pot with a hole in it. Let's replace it with a flower pot with a hole in it. Like, it doesn't do you any good. So you might as well get the guy out there and get the reps that you can, and try to improve as best you can at those positions. And I get it. They're trying to protect Barber a little bit. Yeah. Against Sanford especially, I have no problem with them rotating guys in, because you that is your time to get guys the time and the experience, and to see, hey, is there a guy who is a gamer who picks it up when the intensity goes up, and those sorts of things. But as Bill's in the comments talking about it, I said a couple of years they've struggled to bring an offensive line. He said forever, which is not that far off. And I mean, it was obvious against Miami, right? Miami had 5-star guys and high 4-star guys all over their offensive line. Florida doesn't have that, which means you got to hit on the transfers, and means that you got to settle on a 5. The fact that they can't settle on a 5 means they don't even have 5 they trust. And that's a problem. Now, I will say that what that does mean is you should probably put Barber in on the left side and run that direction, right? Yeah. And that actually is good with a right-handed quarterback. You do want to run the play actions, the bootlegs around the right side, right? So that he's going that way. So at least in some respects, your play action game should play off the stronger part of your offensive line. But I also wouldn't say that Barber is this road grader who's irreplaceable. Mm-hmm. It's just he's not as porous as the other positions. And I'm not sure that's necessarily like glowing praises. It's just a solid SEC tackle. And look, those guys are valuable, but you got to have at least replacement level right tackle and right guard in order to get by in the SEC. And I'm really worried about what's going to happen against some of these better defensive lines. A&M, they have a lot of talent, but it hasn't necessarily translated over to like elite defenses. But man, like this offensive line against Georgia, might be a rough one.
Yeah, and it's just so disappointing, because here we are going into game 3, and yeah, you'd love for it had, like you said, practice by now. Now, granted, they've had some injuries at that position. They've kind of filtered through spring, through fall camp. There have been some injuries at that spot, so maybe has put them a little bit behind in trying to identify the 5. But at the same time, I've said if this staff and their calling card, granted, because we know the recruiting hasn't been there. We don't know what in the world's been going on there. A couple of good prospects throughout Billy Napier's tenure, Rob Sale's tenure there. But development was going to have to be the calling card. And heck, in this conference, I mean, you're having to develop so many projects to be contributors up there. And that's just really asking a lot at this level of football. Yeah, there have been a couple of good prospects at Louisiana. Then they brought Osiris Torrance from Louisiana. They've had some guys go into the NFL who've been developed by this staff. But at the same time, you're asking them to do that so much in this league. It's really, to me, it's really coming back to haunt them here. Development has not been their calling card at that position.
And recruiting hasn't been either. So,
No.
we do need to. I know somebody on Twitter today was asking, why does Rob Sale escape criticism? And he escapes criticism because he's part of the staff that if Napier doesn't survive, will not survive either.
Yeah.
But certainly the fact that we don't have a.
I just replied, we're beating a dead horse. We all know it's not good. I mean,
Well, and there's a difference between not being good in the SEC and not being good against Samford. And the Wildcat that you specifically referenced earlier a little bit facetiously, the concern to me isn't the Wildcat. I'm actually
agree.
again,
Okay, I agree.
I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier about my main criticism of Napier, which is the consistency of the decision making, because I can understand Lagway being your only real quarterback, right? I mean, they had a preferred walk-on come in when Lagway was out. So he's your only real quarterback in that game. And you go, look, next week against A&M, if Mertz is still out, we ain't running Mertz on 4th and 1. We're going to run a Wildcat. Let's, 1, put that on tape, and 2, let's challenge the offensive line. I'm cool with that. Now, the fact that the offensive line missed an assignment and didn't get the first down is a different issue, but I'm okay with the decision, except for in the second half, they ran a jet sweep with Lagway where he got absolutely drilled. And I'm sitting there going, okay, like if the thought process was we're trying to protect the quarterback from getting hit, what the heck was that? And so, I think that sort of plagues the entire program at this point when you really look at it is Cam Waits the right tackle? Is Crenshaw Dixon the right tackle? If 1 week really makes that big a difference, like if you look at it and go, oh, the film for Waits was awful, let's bring Crenshaw Dixon back in, then it's like, how bad was Crenshaw Dixon in practice that you thought you had to put Waits in that position?
Yes.
And how bad was our pass rush that we didn't see that was going to be a liability against Miami, and all that stuff sort of cascades downhill. So, I mean, look, obviously I'm negative about this specifically because of what we've seen over the course of the last, basically since last October, really. And, the offensive line has been a liability. Mertz, I mean, lost in the concussion for Mertz and the discussion of him and Lagway is how tough that guy was last year. When, I mean, there were a bunch of times where I thought we were going to see Max Brown, and it wasn't until he finally broke his collarbone that Brown came in. But there were a couple of hits he took to his legs where, I thought he was going to be out after that. And man, he was a tough SOB. He came right back in. So, again, I don't doubt Mertz's toughness. I think, if I had an Alabama type roster around him, I think it's a much tougher decision. But considering that we've got an offensive line that we're really talking about struggling to get a push against Samford, I think it all of that colors the decisions that you make going into this one.
I remember, Will, when Florida hit the transfer portal for Graham Mertz, and the first question I asked was he going to be able to make up for an offensive line that was replacing Osiris Torrance last year, all that? So kind of still in that same spot. Is he going to be able to make up for an offensive line? Is he going to be able to make up for a defense that we honestly, against Power 5 opponents, still hasn't found their way? So I think going back to our previous point, still talking about the offensive line right now as well, I still have those questions kind of going back to the quarterback controversy we have here is one of them good enough to overcome an offensive line? Is one of them good enough to overcome the defense on the other side of the ball? Till we see some better play on that side. Hopefully that's coming, but especially for the offensive line aspect of it, you got to think kind of similar how we saw with Anthony Richardson, just kind of helps that offensive line. They may struggle at times, but the mobility of a quarterback can certainly help that group.
Well, and Napier knows, right? I mean, against Miami, the first 14 plays, 11 of them were called passes. Like, so he understood going into that game that they were not going to be able to push the Hurricanes around, which is a problem because Napier's entire offense is predicated, and we actually saw it against Samford. Is there were a couple of runs that they were able to pop with Montrell. They weren't that long; they were like 8, 9, 11-yard runs, but those then set up that play action. I mean, if the defense doesn't have to respect the play action, those safeties never come in. If the safeties never come in, then you can't take those deep shots. Now, amazingly, they actually did get some deep shots against Miami, just weren't able to hit. Lagway, I think, was able to take some, but also create some against Samford. I think that's sort of the key question because they didn't trust the offensive line in that one. If they did, they would have called way more runs. They would have said, we're going to be tougher than you guys. We're going to be okay the only time they seemed to call runs was when it was 3rd and 5 and they were trying to get to 4th and 2, and then they got stuffed. So, again, it's probably justified that he doesn't trust the offensive line, but that's all the more reason to need a dynamic guy back there behind center.
All right, so there we go. Talk on the team right there. Quarterback, offensive line, still a whole lots of questions of where we'll go forward with this game versus Texas A&M at both spots right now. We don't know who we're going to see at quarterback and offensive line. There we go. Going into the 3rd week of the season in Billy Napier's 3rd year, we still got some questions about who we're going to see out there. Yeah, here we go. Wrap up the episode, Will. Saturday morning on College Game Day, of course, they were talking about some of the big programs that had taken some losses, and Clemson and the LSU, of Florida State, and of Florida. So, of course, the game day crew sitting there talking about it. And, of course, Nick Saban's asked about it, and he chimes in about Florida and the issues that he sees at Florida. And Nick Saban's comments, guys, if you missed it, didn't see it, goes as this. Talking about Billy Napier, I think he's got to change the culture. I mean, the culture there is not what it needs to be in terms of the intangible things you play with, Saban said. The toughness, the discipline to control the line of scrimmage. They're not just doing those type of things. I know Napier took over a tough situation, but hopefully you can establish that culture in year 3. Well, that daggers to the heart there. Toughness, discipline. I mean, things to control the line of scrimmage. We just talked about that group. Now, I remember going back to Napier's opening press conference, and I asked him the question, how is he going to build a staff? Oh, we're going to hire 2 offensive line coaches. We're going to take advantage of that. We're going to build the trenches the right way. And I think this goes for the defensive side of the football as well, because, of course, Saban's talking about coming off that Miami game there, where Florida's toughness in the trenches was non-existent. It was pretty apparent. Those were some words that we're probably going to get back to Billy Napier. Well, if they didn't, he was still asked about it today. Here's what he had to say.
I think big picture-wise, I think that we need to experience some success on the field. I think ultimately, I would say that's where we need to take the next step. I think once we do that, much like any culture, it's being built until it gets established, and hey, it works. It's working. I think sometimes. But yeah, I think we're ultimately in year 3, and there's an effort to establish some expectations in culture. I think we're closer. But I think ultimately winning helps kind of galvanize that, in terms of belief and hope. Players having success. We've been close. I think ultimately that's what we got to go do.
Well, for me, plainly put, it is not a winning culture. And that's all it boils down to.
They're not close.
Yeah, that's another thing. I agree.
And you look at the defensive side of the ball especially, and I think what Saban was saying, without really saying it, is his teams are soft. And so, they were 105th against FBS opponents in 2023 or in 2022, giving up 5.9 yards per play. They were 124th last year, giving up 6.5 yards per play. And they're 123rd after, granted, the one game against Miami, giving up 7.6 yards per play. So Florida has been at the very, very bottom of FBS in terms of defensive yards per play allowed for every single, essentially, game that Billy Napier has been in charge. And that is not the defensive line isn't getting enough push on a few plays a game. That's not we lost some close games that had they gone our way, everything would have been better. That's a systematic, your team does not show up to play defense time after time after time. And I spent the entire first half of this ranting about Mertz, but one of the reasons is that he has to offset what's going on the defensive side of the ball. The thing that I feel bad about when I'm aggressively anti-Mertz in terms of Lagway, the thing I feel bad about is the Florida defense in his losses. So he's 5-7 as a starter at Florida, but in his 7 losses, the defense has given up 38 points a game. So, he probably should be 5-7.
Right, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks that would have a much different record. There's some out there, but you're asking him to be an elite quarterback when we know he's not.
Yeah. Well, and so, we talked about the offensive line not getting pushed. One of my worries going into that Miami game was the defensive line wasn't going to be able to get much push. The defensive backfield is now decimated by injuries.
Yeah.
And the good news is that Connor Wegman was absolutely awful against Notre Dame. And so it's sort of the immovable or what is it? The I can't remember what the saying is, but it's like,
I know where you're going. Everybody knows where you're going.
The immovable force and the
unmovable object.
Yeah, whatever it is. So whenever they had those two big dudes in the wrestling that were next to each other, but
sumo match.
There you go. But I mean, so maybe there's an opportunity to get a little bit healthy here, just from the standpoint of A&M doesn't look like they're all that effective on offense. But it also wouldn't surprise me if A&M went out there and Connor Wegman looked like he's a Heisman candidate. Like, I've come to get used to the fact that Florida's defense is going to go out there and make a guy who's not that great look fantastic. I mean, they did it to Spencer Rattler. Brady Cook last year looked pretty good against him. Certainly, I think I think Tennessee's quarterback didn't look great, but the running backs ran wild. And that's been the other thing, is even when they have stopped the quarterback, they haven't been able to stop the run. There's just really been an overall lack of toughness. And when you start talking about culture, that's really what you're talking about. And it's funny, there was that article in the Gainesville Sun that came out before the year, and I didn't really get an opportunity to write a rebuttal, partly because, as Bill says, I'm too negative anyway, but also I just didn't have time to do it. But, they were talking about like cleaning up after the janitor and how everything was like honky-dory and all. And these are the best kids we've ever had.
Having clean lockers.
Well, and here's the deal. I personally will hire someone to go clean the lockers and pick up the trash if they win some damn football games. Like, I really don't care whether the janitor's happy.
So my wife was going to ask, Dave, where's all this money going? Oh, me and Will decided to
we decided we've got an assistant for the janitor to make sure everything's clean. I mean, look, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, obviously, and I think there is something to the team being respectful of the people around them and those sorts of things. But have you ever heard anybody talk about an offensive lineman and the fact that he needs to have a mean streak? Like, that he's got to get out there and be a real a-hole. Like Mazuka last year when he got into that fight with the Tennessee guy, I'm like, hey, like, somebody's showing some fight out there. Like, who's going to go out there and just punch the opposition in the mouth? Like, who's going to make Texas A&M know that you don't walk into the swamp and get out of there without feeling it? Like, Florida may lose the game, but you are going to feel that you played the Gators. And until that is the attitude, until that is the thing that they're striving for, they're going to continue to struggle. And no one has walked out of the swamp for the last 3 years, at least on the offensive side of the ball, with anything other than smiles on their faces, given how they move the ball. And that has to change. To me, this is a defensive mentality shift. Like, when you're talking about the culture, I think the offense has actually been pretty good over the last. It was inconsistent with Anthony Richardson, but it was explosive. It was very consistent, but not explosive under Mertz last year. And this year, I don't know exactly what we're going to get on offense. Some of it depends on who the quarterback is. But the defense has been consistently bad, consistently soft, and consistently just hasn't gotten anybody off the field. And if that continues against Texas A&M, oh boy. I mean, because when you're talking about culture, like I'm almost thinking about, if you think about the Noshawn Marino play for Brandon Spikes, who on Florida's defense is making that play? Like, who is coming and saying,
my boy,
let's go. Well, there you go. I mean, that is a space where maybe you need a guy like Howard to take a leadership role and really step up and do that. The problem is you come up and you stick somebody one time, and then the next play, there's a 40-yard pass because we have a busted coverage, and it doesn't really have the same gravitas. So, there isn't an easy solution. And that's part of the problem is that I just don't look at it. Do you trust the defense to get a stop when it's an important situation, Dave? I mean,
no. I mean, after 4th and 18 last year, no. I mean, had their chances against FSU last year as well, when you actually were playing an overall good game, but just when it come down to crunch time, couldn't make the plays. I think that's another angle to this Texas A&M game, Will, because that Aggies offense and Connor Wegman, they're not special at all. This is a winnable game if you can play good defense. If Graham Mertz starts at quarterback, you can win this game if the defense is somewhat has an average day. They don't have to have a great day. They don't have to live in the backfield. Connor Wegman will help you out just a bit too, but it would be nice if Graham Mertz is starting quarterback to get that help you're talking about that he desperately needed last year to turn his fortunes as a quarterback for the Gators. So, yeah, certainly I want to see that side of the ball, finally step up. And this is not going to be anywhere near that late game stretch of when you play Georgia and you play Texas. I mean, we got to throw Tennessee in there again too. That late game stretch, throw out Kentucky right now because good God, that was awful this past weekend. But starting with that Tennessee game, you're going to play Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas in 3 of the 4 games, starting with that stretch right there. This is your Ole Miss a couple weeks later. LSU, I think Nussmeier is going to be pretty good. I mean, we know about the offenses right there. This is your chance, defense, to build some kind of confidence, but also just go out there and play a good game against an offense that is not going to be anywhere near what you come to face in the next few weeks.
Well, and I'm not asking for a lockdown defense.
No,
I'm asking for one that doesn't roll over and play dead after they give up a touchdown once, and then, all right, well, I guess we're not going to guard anybody. I mean, the Miami just up and down the field the entire game. I thought they were going to play a bunch of middle of the field open coverage, that they were going to play some bend but don't break type of defense, and they did that the first couple of drives, and because of penalties and because of some other things, weren't able to keep the Hurricanes out of the end zone. And then I thought they panicked. And if you look at the stats, they ended up playing, I think, twice as much middle of the field closed coverage as they played middle of the field open, which is exactly what they did last year under Austin Armstrong, and they gave up a ton of big plays. And against Miami in the second half, they gave up a whole bunch of big plays, and a lot of that was because they were bringing extra guys and blitzing. They blitzed like 35% of the time against Miami. That ain't going to get it done. This team needs to be in the 12, 13, 14% blitz rate. They got to get some pressure from those guys up front. But even if they don't, they got to allow having more defensive backs back there, because the coverage skills just aren't in a place where you can leave them on an island and one-on-one all the time. And every time,
and the pressure's not getting there when they bring it too. I mean,
well, that is a really good point. I mean, I asked Knudsen a couple of weeks ago. I was like, it was during the Miami game. I'm like, when's the last time Florida had a free runner at the quarterback? Like where the quarterback was really under pressure and it was like immediate that Florida had a guy in the backfield because the offensive line didn't pick a guy up or something like that. And you know what? The only one we could think of was against LSU a couple of years ago when Gervon Dexter came up the middle and hit Jaden Daniels, and they called a penalty on him. And it would have, and they got the interception on that play, and then it completely turned the game at that point. That's the last time I can remember Florida getting any. I mean, that was 2 years ago. Gervon Dexter has played for the Bears now for a year and a game, and that's the last time I saw somebody get pressure right off the snap, whether it's a defensive lineman, whether it's that you've overloaded one side with a blitz, and so you're able to outnumber the offensive line on one side or the other. Like, it just feels like everybody knows what Florida's blitz package is when they're coming in there. And it does make me wonder, like, again, I go back to what I said earlier about Bud Davis saying, hey, pistol versus offset, we know whether it's a running play or a passing play. It makes me wonder whether there are tells on the defensive side as well that tell them what kind of blitz is coming. And obviously after the Miami game, we heard about that from an offensive perspective, that there were a limited number of plays that they went back and looked at on the defensive side and were sure that they were prepared for in Miami's case. And all of a sudden those plays started to show up and they felt really prepared for it. So, look,
with this defense, and I'm surprised, those blitz numbers that you said, because this defense is built not to do that. With creepers and simulated pressures, it's meant to bring 4 most of the time and not live in bringing more than that. Yeah, of course, you want to throw them off balance. You don't want to be that predictable, but that defense is not meant to live in that percentage of blitzes. It's just not. It's not built that way.
Well, so it's not built that way when it's not Austin Armstrong calling the plays.
Yeah.
Austin Armstrong has always, his time at Southern Miss,
good point.
His time at Florida last year has always been an incredibly blitz-heavy, middle-of-the-field closed coach.
Yeah.
And my thought process in terms of Ron Roberts, and Nick and I had an article where we broke this down in our preseason magazine. The thought process was that Roberts was the exact same way before he went to Baylor. And then those defenses at Baylor all played much more middle of the field open coverage, much less blitzing. And then last year at Auburn, it wasn't the same as at Baylor, but it was not the same way it was at his stops before Baylor. And so I was like, he learned something. He learned the value of really limiting those big plays. And you think about the way college football has evolved over the last 10 to 12 years in terms of the quarterback play and the spread and the ability to get the ball out to guys in space, but also now the air raid and all the different innovations that have come on the offensive side of the ball. One of the adjustments to that has been middle of the field, open type quarters coverages that protect against those big plays and are designed, especially like the matched quarters, and not to get too inside baseball here, but the matched quarters is designed to sort of pattern the guys who are going out in these patterns so that you have basically so that there is no open space to throw to. Right. The whole concept of the air raid offense was always have the receivers run to the open space, and they could make adjustments in the route based on what the defense was doing. And so the adjustment that defensive coordinators made was these matched quarters type defenses that would pattern those things to make sure you didn't have open space. And that is not a blitz happy defensive scheme because you can't pattern those things if you don't have enough defensive backs to do it. And so that's one of my worries is that this is a defense from 15 years ago that is not capable of doing what's necessary. And look, I mean, we can look at
it's pretty much the same defense Georgia runs.
Sort of.
At its base, with your creepers and your simulated press. I mean, they want to do the same things. It's just Florida's front. They don't have the upfront players. They don't.
Well, I mean, so there's some of that, but let's be honest, Dave. If Florida had players worse than Georgia, but was sitting 30th or 40th in defense, I would tell you, yeah, it's the same scheme. It's a player difference. Florida's been 105th, 124th, and now 123rd in yards per play allowed over the past 3 seasons. That ain't players. And I mean, yes, could Florida use a real dynamic guy on the edge? Could Florida use a guy who's going to like push up the middle and collapse the pocket? Yes, like Florida could absolutely use a star who goes out there and is a real game changer. But I mean, against Samford, against the Kentuckys of the world, the South Carolinas of the world, the Arkansas of the world, there's no excuse for those teams to have better defenses than Florida. And they just have consistently. And so we've changed strength and conditioning coaches. We've changed defensive coordinators. We've changed, we've changed defensive back coaches. We've changed defensive line coaches. We're going to face a bunch of those guys against A&M this week.
We have an assistant head coach who is pretty much a defensive coordinator. We got 2 defensive coordinators. We pretty much got 2 defensive coordinators right now.
We got so many people on staff that there should be no reason that the defense can't get to 50th. And hey, maybe it still will, right? One game against Miami is where I have it at 123rd. But man, that Miami game was just like a gut punch from the standpoint of, hey, maybe we won't have big plays this year. Hey, maybe the defense will be able to stop somebody. It can't be as bad as it's been the last 2 years, can it? Or the last 4 years? And man, just punched us right in the nut.
Yeah. Example 1. Yeah. Like I said, this stem from, this is a big game this weekend because I don't think that A&M offense is any special. I mean, they can be good. They can be good. Don't get me wrong. But as we said, we know how much harder it's going to get. If this defense is going to have success, it needs to start this Saturday. Well, to keep it up, and we'll end this episode. Nick Saban he was still talking about Florida and did mention, and this was before the Samford game, so of course he hadn't seen DJ Lagway play yet, but still it's Samford, so you don't want to go too far off on this. Saban did say he didn't know that if Florida had an elite quarterback or elite playmakers. Billy Napier was asked, what would you say to that? He goes, well, it's determined. We got to go prove it. I think that's who we are. We got to go prove it. We have a lot to prove and certainly have every opportunity to do it. This will be the next opportunity Saturday at 3:30. So he wasn't going to take too much bait there about what Nick Saban was saying about this, about the lack of playmakers on Florida. But we hope DJ Lagway is eventually that guy. We hope DJ Lagway shows it on this Saturday when Billy Napier says, hey, Saturday at 3:30 is going to be the next opportunity. We hope that next opportunity shows up there. But yeah, Nick Saban pointing out what we all kind of know, just the lack of elites at Florida.
Well, I mean, I told you before the Miami game that if Billy let me down again, I was going to turn into the fan from Major League 2 who's, yelling vile thing every time. every time Rick Vaughn comes in. I haven't gone quite that far. I mean, I want to see Florida do well. That's what's really frustrating about all this stuff is that you see an elite quarterback, and this is the second time in the last 5 years that we've been like, we see him. Just give him to us. Like, please, we're see him.
Tired of the crumbs.
Well,
tired of the crumbs. Give me the whole plate.
To see that throw that Anthony Richardson made against the Texans this weekend, and you just go, Emory Jones, really? Like, Emory Jones is a fine quarterback. He can't do that. And if it's like, oh, well, he doesn't know well, then teach it to him. like give him the reps to teach it to him so that he's ready to go, because I have eyes and I can see that Anthony Richardson has special qualities, and he may not win a Super Bowl with Indianapolis, but that throw this weekend made me go, oh my God, like, how in the world did that guy not play more than 1 year at Florida? And then also, how did we go 6-6 with him at quarterback? And then I look at the defensive stats and I immediately know how we went 6-6 with him as the starting quarterback. And, so it's the same thing with Lagway, where I'm just like, it's right there. I can see it. Like, come on. Like, it's like somebody who buys like a really nice car, but their wife won't let them take it out and drive it. Like, you might crash the car. We can't afford it if you crash the car. Keep it in the garage. Then why the hell do we have the car? So in case you can't tell, I would like to see DJ Lagway play this weekend, please.
Yes, I can see. 3:30 in the Swamp, of course. We got Joe Tessitore and Jesse Palmer back on the call. So the same crew that was there 2 weeks ago.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, hopefully they have a lot more positive to talk about there on Saturday.
Man, I hope so. I can't take another loss, man. I need some wins. We need to chain these things together. It's so much more fun. Like, the car analogy is a great one, because that was so much fun last weekend. I get it at Samford.
Yeah,
I get it that the competition is not what it's going to be. I understand. It's the first time I've had fun watching football since the Tennessee game last year.
Yeah.
And,
the South Carolina game was fun last year.
I mean,
the end of it.
The end of it was fun, but it was the first. Okay, so let me put it this way. It's the first time I've enjoyed watching all 4 quarters
there you go.
of a Florida football game since that Tennessee game.
Oh, even up 14-0 at halftime, Will.
Well, I mean,
I know I'm bringing it down. I know.
Man, and I'm the Debbie Downer. Bill's right. We are negative, Dave. Way to go, man.
Well, I didn't get to go to Gainesville. I explained that this past weekend because, dealing with – I mean, I think I'm going to need a boat actually to get out of my yard tomorrow. The rain just won't stop here in Jacksonville. It's supposed to be raining all week too, so who knows. But thankfully, it does sound like we're going to have our tailgate spot, thankfully. I think it all has been settled there from the lack of communication from Florida and that joke of – taking away tailgate spots that people have tailgated at for years because of some what they were told grass, but
that was a lie. So the PR machine that is the University of Florida continues apace. Like it's amazing how you can do that stuff when you're 11-0.
Yeah,
right? Like no one would have blinked an eye if they'd have said, we're gonna make you pay for parking now because the quality of the product's really awesome. But when you do it after that loss to Miami and you do it right before the Samford game, that one's a little bit rough. So on Stand Up and Holler this week, we gave out the phone number that the mayor had given people to call in. So we'll take a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah.
But if you haven't watched that yet and you watch Stand Up and Holler this week and you see us talking about a phone number, don't call it. We've already bugged them enough. They decided to relent.
Yeah, keep it going so they won't do it again.
Sure, I'm up for it. That's fine.
Yeah, so we did get the message for this season. Everything is as normal. So hopefully that doesn't mean they're going to try and take it away from us next year. But, at least we now know that the home games for the rest of the year should be good.
Yeah. Just charge parking and put it in the NIL.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Tell us. I mean, I'm sure we'll roll it into the funds. We'll pay for the spot.
Again, just like the janitor, I will pay for the grass seed. We'll pay to have it laid down at the end of the year. Don't take away my Thunders.
There we go. LSU game, Will Miles will be in town doing some Thunders. So.
Oh, yeah. With my 9-year-old. We give him Dr. Pepper and have him play drinking games with us. I'm sure CPS is going to pay me a visit pretty soon.
Oh, Max.
Hey, I will say.
He's made it fun.
Well, so he asked me this year, we were talking about which game we were going to go down for. And he goes, Dad, I really don't care which game we go down for. He's like, but can we go to the party before? I'm like, heck yeah, man. That's where we're headed.
Wait till he goes to college, Will.
Oh, my goodness. That'll be an experience.
All right. That is fun episode here of Gators Breakdown. Hopefully we're back here next Monday night talking about another Gator victory, this time over Texas A&M.
Lagway throws for 300 yards.
Yeah, hopefully that too. Defense held them to 220, 250. Dominating performance in some ways. But take a win for sure. As you said, Will. It's just a lot more fun to talk about wins. And now we just need some wins over SEC opponents, FBS opponents. Hopefully have some fun next week talking about that.
Oh man, I hope so. So yeah, we'll see. I actually haven't done my deep dive yet this week. That's coming up. So
yep.
So maybe I'll change my opinion as things go. I certainly did for the Miami game and regretted it afterwards. But we'll see how A&M shows up on tape when I take a look at them.
All right, that is Will Miles, readingreaction.com. Stand up and holler on YouTube. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.